Chapter 402 Chen Duoduo and Lin'er. He was the one who had helped to stabilize Huo Yua's injuries along with Elder Sun when Huo Yua returned after plucking a yearning heartbreaking grass. On the battlefield, he also became the busiest person, moving to treat whoever was injured. As Chen Duoduo suffered a critical injury, he naturally rushed over as quickly as possible. When Lin'er saw Elder Zuang, it was as if she had seen a life-saving straw. Elder Zuang, save him, quick, save him. How's Duoduo? Elder Zuang looked very gloomy and gently shook his head. Difficult. When Lin'er heard that, her tears started to flow uncontrollably once again. If even Elder Zuang, who was the most adept at healing in Shrek Academy, claimed that saving Chen Duoduo was difficult, more than half of Chen Duoduo's life was already gone. Duoduo, you can't die. How can you die? You are so strong. You'll be able to survive. You'll be able to, right? Tell me that you'll be able to survive. Lin'er grabbed onto Chen Duoduo's hand tightly, and her voice was hoarse from all the crying. Chen Duoduo coughed twice and spat out 2 foamy mouthfuls of blood. He looked slightly better after being treated by Elder Zuang. At this point, 2 other figures rushed over. They were Xiaosh and Kaimaya, the 2 deans of the Martial Soul Department. They were shocked when they saw Chen Duoduo, and they also noticed the situation on the west side of the city. Lin'er and Chen Duoduo were both struck down by the Bear Lord's all-out attack. As they didn't know how the 2 of them were faring, they naturally rushed over to check out the situation immediately. Old Chen, how are you? Xiaosh squatted down on the other side of Chen Duoduo. Chen Duoduo chortled. I'm fine. It's pretty good like this. The 2 of you came at the right time. I've some things to say since I've some time left. Lin'er's eyes were filled with tears as she said, Duoduo, stop talking. Focus and let Elder Zuang treat you properly. You mustn't die. Elder Zuang seemed to have used up a lot of soul power as he treated Chen Duoduo, and Chen Duoduo's voice slowly became smoother. He laughed bitterly. Although my cultivation can't compare to the 2 of you, do you really think I don't know my own condition? Let me finish talking. Lin'er was sobbing as she said, You can say anything you want. Chen Duoduo's gaze turned gentler as he looked at her. Lin'er, I like you very much. It's true. From the day I entered the academy, I've always liked you. However, you should know that I'm not good enough for you. You're so pretty, and you capture everyone's attention. I can only hide my liking for you deep in my heart, and I can only watch you from afar. Even so, I'm already very satisfied. Lin'er was in a daze as she looked at Chen Duoduo. Her face turned slightly pale. Although they had been married for years, Chen Duoduo had never said anything like this to her before. Chen Duoduo had a reminiscent look in his eyes. Then, I could see you every day in the academy, and it was the greatest blessing for me. However, this blessing soon faded away. As I silently observed you, I discovered that you already developed a liking for someone else. Like Xiaosh, both of you are assault-type soul masters. He's handsome, talented, and has a strong martial soul. There were so many students in our class that had a crush on him then. Xiaosh's face turned red as he heard this, and he twisted his head to look at Kaimaya. Kaimaya acted like she didn't hear anything and only smiled slightly at him to hint that she didn't mind. Yes, Xiaosh is much more outstanding than me and is better than me in all aspects. At that point in time, I became slightly jealous. I was jealous that he was able to capture your heart. To surpass him, I gave my all in the hopes of catching up to him. However, a nightmare happened to me. After a temporary, preliminary selection by the academy, we were about to be placed in different classes. As a defense-type soul master, I couldn't possibly be in the same class as you. I really hated myself then for being a defense-type soul master. I really wished I was also an assault-type or a control-type soul master. In that way, I could continue to see you every day. The rules of the academy couldn't be changed, and I was eventually separated from you. After I went to another class, I thought to myself that I had to give my all. Even if I couldn't obtain your love, I had to defeat Xiaosh. At least in terms of abilities, I had to be better than him. I cultivated tirelessly every day. Once classes were over, I would always quietly walk past the front of your class. If I was lucky, I could take a glance at you, which left me very happy. However, a bigger nightmare occurred. After some time, I heard some of your classmates mention that you were dating him and that the 2 of you had become a couple. It was a huge blow to me then. I was extremely upset for a couple of days. I really wanted to charge in front of you and tell you that I liked you. However, I was never courageous enough. When I looked in the mirror and saw myself, I only felt inferior. Do you still remember? During the first internal competition of the academy, I finally had the chance to defeat Xiaosh. I faced him during the semi-finals. I fought extremely hard for that fight, and we fought for 2 hours until our soul power was drained. I still lost in the end, though. However, I was surprised when all the teachers believed that I was unyielding and was willing to fight. They believed that I had great potential and started to nurture me. After that, I made my way into the inner courtyard and became a disciple there. I finally had more time to see you. However, I was extremely tormented every time I saw you because he was always with you. Xiaosh's talent was indeed too great. I kept on chasing after him, but I wasn't able to catch him. Every time he fought, I always lost. I started to believe that there was something called talent in this world. After he became Elder Mu's disciple, he managed to widen the gap between us. I knew then that, perhaps, I wouldn't be able to surpass him in this life. Xiaosh sighed as he silently listened to Chen Duoduo's words. He said, Duoduo, do you know? I was also giving my all at that point in time because you were chasing me too hard. I had no choice to place all my focus on my cultivation and studies to prevent being surpassed by you. In fact, you'd already succeeded then. As I was too focused on these 2 things, I spent very little time with Lin'er. Chen Duoduo chortled and said, Is that so? That's great. Then, if it were any other time, Xiaosh might have turned sarcastic. However, Chen Duoduo was extremely pale right now, and his life aura was getting weaker and weaker, even though they hadn't shared a harmonious relationship in all these years because of Lin'er. Xiaosh couldn't say anything harsh to Chen Duoduo at this point. Chen Duoduo twisted his head to look at Xiaosh, and the gentleness in his eyes turned into fury. If it were me, I wouldn't have left Lin'er for even a minute. I would have protected and taken care of her forever. What about you? You are a scoundrel that only knows how to hurt her. You said that you cultivated tirelessly because I was hot on your heels. But why did you have so much time to flirt with other girls? Why did you hurt Lin'er? Even so, she stayed true and continued to love you deeply. Do you know that? Xiaosh was half red and half pale. When he looked at Chen Duoduo, who was getting weaker and weaker, he wasn't able to muster a reply. In fact, Chen Duoduo wasn't wrong. Kaimaya walked to Lin'er's side and gently patted her shoulder. After this, she turned around and left. She didn't care about Xiaosh and Lin'er's past. However, she was one of the girls that Xiaosh had flirted with. In addition, she was the victor out of all the girls. She wasn't willing to listen any further. Furthermore, they belonged to the same golden generation. Seeing that Chen Duoduo was on the verge of death, she couldn't control herself. Chen Duoduo glared at Xiaosh, and his face started turning red. It seemed as if he had regained some vitality due to his fury. You hurt Lin'er time and time again, but she forgave you time and time again. It was only when she saw you getting intimate with other women that she decided enough was enough and left you. Xiaosh lowered his head in pain. Yes, I wasn't resilient enough. However, I realized my mistake after Lin'er left me. I searched everywhere for her, but I didn't manage to find her. I only wanted another chance. It was only after losing her that I realized how much I loved her. However, she had already become your wife after she returned. Do you know how much pain I felt then? You deserve it. Lin'er suddenly lifted her head and shouted at Xiaosh. Xiaosh seemed to have lost all his energy, and his head drooped. Lin'er is right. You deserve it. After she returned, did you persist? You chose to be a coward and quickly got together with Maya before marrying her. Have you ever admitted your mistake to Lin'er? Did you try to seek her forgiveness? No, you didn't. You are a coward. Chen Duoduo's voice was trembling right now and he started to speak choppily. Xiaosh, let me tell you something. My marriage with Lin'er was actually a result of her desire to make you infuriated. Nothing has ever happened between us. Even after being married for years, we've remained clean until now. Lin'er is still a virgin. It's because she loves you that she couldn't handle the pain you brought to her, and thought of such a method to test your love for her. What about you? What did you give her in return? Your gift to her was your marriage to Maya. What did you say? Xiaosh opened his eyes wide and grabbed the front of Chen Duoduo's shirt. There was an unbelievable look in his eyes. Bang. Shen Lin'er slashed her palm towards Yan Xiaosh and roared furiously. Don't touch him. If you dare touch him, I'll fight it out with you. Yan Xiaosh struck a battleman after he was hit by Shen Lin'er. Given his cultivation, he shouldn't be in such a sorry state as he fell to the ground. However, he seemed as if he had lost his soul right now. Shen Lin'er was holding onto Chen Duoduo's shoulder with one hand and letting him rest on her body. She used her other hand to hold his hand and sobbed as she asked, "Why are you telling him all this? What's the point?" Chen Duoduo suddenly turned pale, and a wave of weakness caused him to even be unable to lift his eyelids. He slowly shut them, and his voice also became weaker, because I won't have the time to say it if I don't say it. Right now, you suffered so much for him in your heart all these years. How can he not learn it? Lin'er, get together with him. If you still love him, I never, ever thought of stopping you. All these years, we were only a couple in name, but we aren't a true couple. You've always remained pure. In fact, I've always wanted to muster the courage to ask you whether you even like me a little. However, I've never dared to. I'm afraid that I won't be able to see you every day anymore. It's true. Did you know that? All these years, I was most afraid that you'd suddenly end this marriage. Although it's not really a true marriage, I was still very comforted by it. In my heart, I'm going soon. Lin'er, take good care of yourself. I've never had the courage to say anything, but I finally have it. Now, I love you. I really love you more than myself. After he finished speaking, his body trembled slightly, and he leaned his head in Shen Lin'er's embrace before he stopped breathing. Duoduo, Duoduo. Lin'er exclaimed anxiously. However, Chen Duoduo didn't react to her at all. Duoduo, you're so silly. Why didn't you tell me all this earlier? Why are you so silly? Why did I fall in love with that scoundrel? I've already lost all hope for him in my heart. I know how well you treat me. It's just that I've been unable to cross the barrier in my heart. We were both too silly. I made you wait for so many years because I was too reserved. Duoduo, I'm sorry. Duoduo, will you wake up? I'll answer your question now. You also belong in my heart. I don't know if this is love, but humans have feelings. You've been with me for years and taken meticulous care of me. How could I not know this? I'm also a person with a heart. My heart has already been quietly reformed by you. It's just that I've been unwilling to admit it. I don't know if that feeling is love, but I really can't do without you. I can't leave you. Duoduo, don't die. Wake up. As long as you wake up, I'll be your real wife. I'll accompany you forever. Duoduo. Shen Lin'er was weeping, and Yan Xiaosh was in a daze as he sat where he was. There was a depressed look on his face. He silently lowered his head and didn't even dare to look at Shen Lin'er and Chen Duoduo. In terms of relationships, he was a complete failure. As he slowly stood up, Yan Xiaosh walked up to Chen Duoduo and Shen Lin'er. He muttered, "Old Chen, you've won. I've won in terms of abilities. However, you've won in terms of relationships. In that regard, I've lost to you utterly. You used your persistence to trance me completely. You're right. I don't deserve Lin'er's love, and I don't deserve to be with her. Old Chen, I admire you." As he spoke, he bent his waist and bowed respectfully at a 90-degree angle. Cough, cough. At this moment, unfriendly coughs suddenly sounded. Elder Zhuang stood up and walked to Shen Lin'er's side. He patted her shoulder and said, "All right, stop crying. Send Duoduo back to rest." What? Shen Lin'er was stunned and lifted her head to look at Elder Zhuang. Elder Zhuang acted as if nothing had happened and said, "He's lost too much blood and even detonated his martial soul. He's hurt badly and can't drain too much energy. This is why I'll have to let him sleep for a while. I'll feed him some medicine when he returns. Given his physical condition, I'm sure he'll be fine in around 10 days' time." Ah. Shen Lin'er blinked. There were still tears in her eyes. However, she was completely in a daze. This turn of events was simply too sudden. Shen Lin'er was in slight disbelief, and her lips were shaking as she asked, Didn't you say just now that?" Elder Zhuang smiled and replied, "You were too frantic because you were too concerned about him. Although he has fainted and his pulse is weak, he's not gone. I said that it was more difficult to treat him given his critical injuries. I didn't say they were untreatable. All right, quickly, send him back. The soul beasts are attacking the city with even greater intensity. I'm going to treat the others. Come back to fight too, and be careful not to be careless again." After he finished speaking, Elder Zhuang drifted into the air and disappeared. After watching Elder Sun disappear, Shen Lin'er took a look at Chen Duoduo again. She sensed his body more carefully, and saw that it was true that Chen Duoduo wasn't dead. Although his breathing was weak, she stopped crying, but her face turned slightly red. Earlier, everyone around could clearly hear her confession. She wasn't even able to preserve her greatest secret anymore. However, it was truly wonderful that Chen Duoduo wasn't dead. Shen Lin'er didn't dare to look at the others around her, and she carried Chen Duoduo into the air and disappeared towards Shrek Academy. Elder Zhuang drifted to another place where there were other injured people. He wore a smile on his face. As he treated the wounded, he muttered to himself, "These two kids were really worrisome. Duoduo, you really owe me a huge favor." Haha, Shen Lin'er and Chen Duoduo's relationship finally bore fruit after a life and death situation. However, Shrek City was in a disastrous situation right now. Chen Duoduo was critically injured at the western side of the city, and Shen Lin'er had no choice but to temporarily leave the battlefield. Although the Green Shadow Douluo Elder Song managed to pester the Bear Lord using the speed of her Green Shadow Godly Hawk, the Bear Lord's terrifying offensive and defensive strength was simply too dominant. Elder Song found it very difficult to hold him off. The eastern side of the city was in slightly better condition. The Scarlet King's abilities were slightly inferior, and he was resisted by a rank 96 elder. The attack of the soul beasts from the east side was also not very ferocious. However, the northern and southern sides were getting into more and more trouble. The southern side was where the soul beast army's main attack was concentrated. Under the leadership of Bai Ji and her immense healing abilities, the soul beasts weren't afraid of death. Soul tools weren't able to completely suppress them anymore. While the explosions of stationary soul cannon shells managed to cause huge losses to the soul beast army, they also strengthened the resolve of the soul beasts. There were already soul beasts that were charging up towards the top of the city wall and starting to engage in close combat. The students from Shrek Academy were also slowly finding themselves in melee. Things were equally bad at the northern side of the city. The Myriad Demon King couldn't compare to the Bear Lord in terms of offensive strength. His abilities could completely curb his own. However, the Myriad Demon King was much more effective on a battlefield than the Bear Lord. If the Bear Lord was like an assault type soul master, then the Myriad Demon King was like a control type soul master. The Myriad Demon King continuously unleashed countless vines from his body and swept them towards the top of the northern city wall. Although there were elders from the Sea God's Pavilion who tried to stop him, he was simply too strong and also very sly. He kept moving around, and the two elders that were attacking him were helpless against him. Given that the soul beast army was approaching from beneath the city wall, they didn't dare to venture too far away. They could only keep on slashing the Myriad Demon King's vines. Even so, more than half of the large soul tools used to defend the city were destroyed by the Myriad Demon King. Furthermore, the vines also became ladders for the soul beasts to climb up the city wall. The northern city wall was in a critical situation. There were more soul beasts charging up towards the top there than on any other side. More and more of the elders from the Sea God's Pavilion had no choice but to proceed towards the northern city wall to hold the fort. Southern city wall. The Tang Sect was slowly being integrated into the battle. Ji Duoduo was standing in front, and he held his judgment sword in both hands. A lion-shaped, 10,000-year soul beast charged up towards the city wall and roared furiously into the sky. He shook the ordinary soldiers off balance with his roar. Ji Duoduo pointed his judgment sword at him, and a sharp streak of sword light shot out. It transformed into a longsword that slashed toward this lion. However, this lion was very cunning. After sensing the sharp sword intent, it turned around and jumped off the city wall. It was undoubtedly the best way of dodging. However, the strike of a thunderous dragon claw came down diagonally and blocked its path. A huge cauldron also fell from the sky. It was struck with paralysis and shock, causing it to freeze in midair. A black light shone, and its head was chopped off. A huge lizard suddenly leapt up from the bottom of the city wall towards the Tang Sect's formation. It was charging at Jiang Nanan. Shu Sanqi pulled Jiang Nanan and shifted their positions before his swan shield was unleashed. A boom rang out from his shield. While While the huge lizard had charged with ferocious momentum, it was now unable to move even an inch closer, blocked by the Swanwu shield. Shu Sanqi pulled Jiang Nanan with his left hand while he unleashed his shield with his right hand. Jiang Nanan exploited the momentum of his pull to flip her body up before she did a handstand on his head. After this, she bent her waist as if she had no bones in her body. Her toes touched the top of the soul beast's neck. Her second soul ring lit up, and a strange yellow glow spread from her legs. After this, Jiang Nanan started to spin rapidly, using her body as a pivot. Jiang Nanan's second soul skill was called gravity control. She wasn't just controlling her opponent, she was also controlling herself. The huge lizard's head was slammed against the wall. Jiang Nanan exerted force with her toes, and directly crushed the central nerves of this 1,000-year lizard. Its body started contorting, and it was unable to crawl forward anymore. Nan Shuishui, Nan Qiakayo and Yu followed the members of the Tang Sect, ready to reinforce them if needed. Nan Qiakayo and Yu were still fine. They fully understood the abilities of everyone from the Tang Sect, but this was the first time Nan Shuishui had witnessed them in action. She was very impressed with all these young people who possessed 6-ringed and even 7-ringed cultivations. Not only did they possess the best combination of soul rings, but each of them had specialized in something. When they unleashed their soul skills, they were extremely strong, and their control was even more frightening. They didn't waste a single drop of their soul power, and were always able to defeat their enemies with the simplest method. Ji Juogen was still the most lethal among everyone. When he slashed his judgment sword, 1,000-year soul beasts were completely unable to resist his strength. Wherever his sword light passed, all the soul beasts that attempted to climb the city wall were killed. 10,000-year soul beasts were only able to resist him slightly before they were overwhelmed. While the movements of his sword were very simple, he was definitely not inferior to an 8-ringed soul Douluo in terms of lethality. More and more soul beasts were charging up towards the top of the city walls. As physical combat started to break out, Shrek Academy fully demonstrated its strength. Every teacher and student possessed great fighting strength. Furthermore, they shared great chemistry with one another. The assault type, agility type, defense type, auxiliary type and control type soul masters coordinated very well with one another. They suffered very few casualties as they managed to fight off the assault of the soul beasts. The soul rings that the Tang Sect had obtained under the leadership of Sun Quan earlier played a very important role right now. Many of the Shrek City Defense Army's soul masters were strengthened because of those soul rings, and the overall abilities of the army had greatly increased as a result. All the stationary soul cannon shells had been fired, and the soul beast army had suffered great casualties. From the air, it was clear that the soul beast army was no longer dense. There were empty spaces in many parts of the army. Bai Ji had already given her best. However, she was helpless, since many of the stationary soul cannon shells weren't fired in her direction. Soul tools were still very effective, even though the battle had now begun to be fought through physical means. Over the past few years, Shrek Academy had started to value the use of soul tools by soul masters. In the martial soul department, there were even special classes designed to instruct soul masters on the use of soul tools. They weren't just taught how to use long-range soul tools, but also taught how to operate close combat soul tools. Along with the help of the self-driving forts, Shrek Academy was able to hold off the onslaught of the soul beasts, even though they were under great pressure. Different sparks could be seen in the sky and on the ground. The sky was the battlefield of the strong soul masters and soul beasts. From the elders of the sea gods pavilion to the inner end, outer courtyard teachers, those that had 7 rings or more mainly fought in the sky. Their opponents were soul beasts with cultivations of 50,000 years or more. Soul masters fought based on their intelligence, abilities, and the help of soul tools. While there were more wounded soul masters, very few of them died. Once someone was injured, he was immediately replaced while he sought medical attention. After being treated, he would be sent out to fight once again. The amount of medicine that Shrek Academy had stored could rival that of an empire. It was the result of 10,000 years of accumulation. Time passed, second after second, as the battle became more and more brutal. The soul beasts' aerial army became even more determined. Even after paying such a huge price, they still weren't willing to retreat. 2 hours passed. 4 hours passed. More and more casualties started to appear on Shrek City's walls. The carcasses of soul beasts started to pile up, and various colors of soul rings started to appear. Some of them were extremely valuable. Shrek was on the verge of collapse, but what about the soul beasts? From Bai Ji's pale face, it was evident that the soul beast army had suffered great losses as well. As this was an all-out attack, the soul beasts that were charging in front were either 1,000-year or 10,000-year soul beasts. However, these powerful soul beasts were greatly drained right now. The 100-year soul beasts that followed behind them were obviously lacking in terms of abilities. Bai Ji knew that the Great Stardo Forest would have to bear heavy losses even if they won this battle. Although there hadn't yet been any great losses to their higher-end combat strength, they would lose too many 100, 1,000, and 10,000-year soul beasts. If they were struck by the stationary soul cannon shells, they were completely wiped out. The 2,000 stationary soul cannon shells had wiped out a third of the soul beast army. It would take centuries to replenish this number of soul beasts. However, there was no way out of this war right now. The eyes of all the soul beasts had turned bloodshot by now. It was too difficult to retreat. Only the blood of Shrek City could wash away this hatred of theirs. Up in the sky, Qian was still restrained by Elder Sun and Elder Mu. At times lights flashed in the sky, showing that Qian was struggling. 6 hours of the afternoon had passed. Night descended once again. Shrek City was shaking, and looked like it could collapse at any time. However, it managed to persist for another hour even as it shook. It seemed like there was some special force protecting it that prevented it from collapsing completely. This special force was called faith. It was a faith in Shrek, and a faith to protect Shrek's glory. It had only been 2 days since the beast wave appeared. However, Shrek City was brought to its knees in just those 2 days. 100 years ago, Shrek Academy's soul tool development hadn't reached its current state when the last beast wave appeared. However, Shrek Academy had the body sex help burn, which had enabled them to survive until reinforcements arrived. Furthermore, Bai Ji wasn't present then, so the beast wave was naturally not as strong. 2 days. It had only been 2 days. Even if the reinforcements came at top speed, they couldn't arrive so quickly. Even though Shrek was already proud of how they had been performing, as they made the soul beasts who were lying on the flat ground outside the city and on top of the city wall pay a painful price. Was Shrek City still going to walk a path of destruction? The lights of their soul tools had practically disappeared. Almost all the soul tools used to defend the city had been destroyed. The self-driving forts had also retreated into the city due to a lack of sealed milk bottles to power them. The soul engineers driving them drained their own soul power to bring these self-driving forts back into the city. At the eastern side of the city, Elder Song and Lin'er fought the Bear Lord, but they were continuously being forced back. At the southern city wall, the fighting was already spread across the top of the city wall. The soul masters were exhausted. Against such a large number of soul beasts, their soul power was continuously drained even though they had the upper hand and kept on killing soul beasts. Everyone knew that the collapse of Shrek City could happen at any time. Once one side of the city fell, a chain reaction would begin. All of them grit their teeth and persisted. Even though they knew they were going to die, they didn't want the collapse of Shrek City to start from their side. Boom. A deafening boom echoed across all of Shrek City. Even those who were busy fighting couldn't help but turn their attention towards the origin of that deafening boom. It came from the eastern city wall. Elder Song's speed was slowing down as time passed, and as a result of her age, she didn't manage to dodge one attack, and was struck to the top of the eastern city wall by the Bear Lord's Dark Gold and Terraclaw. Suddenly, a huge, irregular hole that was around 20 meters wide appeared in the city wall. Doomed. The soldiers defending the eastern city wall turned extremely dismal. They were already in such a dire situation. If the city wall was damaged, they would lose the only thing they could depend on. Was the final breach going to occur here? The Bear Lord roared excitedly. The soul beasts outside the eastern side of Shrek City risked everything and charged towards this huge hole. Shrek City soldiers were too fatigued. Even though they knew they had to give their all to plug this hole, they didn't have the energy to even move their legs. Their soul power had been completely drained. While they really wanted to cover this hole, they were completely helpless right now. Were they really doomed? At this critical moment, a beam of gentle golden light suddenly spread out from within Shrek City, coming from the direction of Shrek Academy. That beam of golden light spread very quickly. In an instant, it reached all the way to the city walls. All the humans felt warmth as they were immersed in this golden light. They felt an indescribable comfort, and their energy and soul power started to quickly recover. All the soul beasts were also pushed off from the city city walls by a strong force. Surprised cheers sounded from all four sides of the city walls at the same time. Even the stronger soul masters from Shrek quickly retreated to the region covered by the beam of golden light. Even when the Bear Lord, Myriad Demon King, and Scarlet King attacked with all their might, they weren't able to shake this beam of golden light. Right now, the entirety of Shrek City seemed to have been engulfed by an invincible barrier. While the soldiers and soul masters were cheering, the elders from the Sea God's Pavilion weren't delighted. Only they knew where that force came from. It was the strength of the golden tree. This strength was the ultimate strength that the ancestors of Shrek had left behind to protect Shrek after they fused with the golden tree. It could only be tapped into in the direst of situations. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.